Okay, YouTubers, so obviously got the engine out, and I found a couple of things that aren't in its favour. Bores, well, they're not too bad, decent hone with the dunny brush will do them good. They'll come up alright, not too bad. Now, exhibit number 1. That's bearing, well, that was a bearing I should say, off what cylinder is that one? 2. Cylinder number 2. And that's not just one shell. If I just peel them apart, I have to be very careful not to cut myself. This is a razor sharp, but that's one is absolutely paper thin. And that's 2. So that one's got 2 holes. So that makes it, I don't know. Anyway, they're both. I think that one should be the bottom. That one's the top. But you know, I could break that if I pressed hard enough, but I'm not going to. Crank's pretty bad. Pretty bad, actually. Although a light sand might come up alright, but I reckon I'll probably need to have it machined. Although really, to be honest, with a light, just to rub up with some wet and dry, that'll probably come up usable. Although, it's probably needs to be reground. The rest aren't too bad. The rest will, you know, although there's a few flat spots in them. The rest had come up alright, usable anyway. But aside from that, there's plenty of other things that I found. Every piston, they're all the crank bearings, and they weren't too bad. You know, the main bearings, you know, that one's, yeah, I'm guessing that cavity's meant to be there. Looks pretty much machined into it. That was the centre bearing, I think, isn't it? Oh no, that's the front. Okay, so that's probably meant to be like that. Oh yeah, they're all like that actually. That's fair enough too. Now the second piston, that's the only piston that didn't have shattered rings in it. They're the oil rings, and a few of them got caught because what happened was, when I pulled the crank out, second cylinder piston, and I think it was, well, 2 of them stuck to the crank anyway and pulled out as I lifted the crank. I didn't notice, so they lifted out with it, and the rings got stuck, so I had to pull them out, had to reef them out to get the actual, get them out of the block. But where is it? Cylinder number 4 piston, which will be one of these 2. That's 4th. You can see it has a huge crack, a pretty big chunk missing. There's parts of the rings that were left. The rest is just shattered everywhere. Haven't tried to fit this back in the ball, see how much slop there is. Yeah, where's the back? Yeah, that's the back. No, there's not that much slop. They're pretty good in there. There's a little bit actually. But it's not that bad, you know. New set of rings, and you could probably excuse that. But you know, obviously, it's going to need new piston. So, new set of pistons. Rods are going to have to be checked pretty thoroughly, I'd say. Either crank totally reground, and probably resized too. Yeah, that's not too good there either, that sealing surface. So it's probably going to need another crank. I'll try and find a second-hand crank that's in reasonable, workable condition. Otherwise, 160 to get this ground, and then I'll have to, probably, the rods are going to want to be resized, especially cylinder 2. So, that's $25 each. Then bearings just are about 100, so already we're at what? 160 plus 100, so that's 260. So probably $300 for the bottom end. Then pistons and rings on top of that. And the valves are all pretty burnt, and well, not so much burnt as pitted. I've removed one of them, but they're all pretty much the same. The leak down test, they leak a bit of fluid out of them, so she's not happy. The block's pretty good though. The block's reusable, so I'm going to have to look into it. Might, with a bit of luck, be able to find a cheap crank. Then I can get or a cheap crank, a cheap set of rods, and I'll just get probably pistons as well. Probably buy pistons new though. New set of pistons and rings, probably looking at 150, 160. I think I saw some for. So it's all going to add up. Either that, or you can buy a full rebuild kit from the States that doesn't include crank, but everything else that I'd need for, I think it was about 350 or so. But yeah, that's not happy. Needs to be reground. Although there's not that much deep pitting on it, to be honest. It's just more where the bearings are sort of glazed it up with gunk. But if that's all that's left of bearings, there was a bit of a problem there. So between that, all the rings were broken except third cylinder. Yeah, it was a third actually, which was the one that had 110 pounds of compression, which was pretty good. The worst was fourth with the cracked piston. That was at 40 pounds. So how this thing was running is beyond me, but it must have just been very low in compression, still running, but then finally it spun these bearings, and that was the end of it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, because really there's too much other shit in this engine. For this much to actually have happened, like those pistons, especially looking at that piston, that has to have been broken for quite a while. All those rings have been broken for years, I'd say, by the look of them, because they're all pretty chewed up. So it's probably been, and then the valve's no good either, so it's probably been either overheated pretty catastrophically, and the previous owner didn't know or didn't notice, or it's just, bit by bit wore away to destruction. It's only done 320,000 to do this much damage is fairly, for a Toyota engine. So yeah, I'm probably looking for another engine, unless I can get cheap crank.